That one's going to send you all the way in the back. Okay.
Hi.
So Spielberg has said that the first time you heard your British accent was after the last take, after the last fight. You were known as a method actor. So when did you start the character of Lincoln, and what qualities did you want to bring to him?
The trouble with even trying to answer a question like that, I find, is that everything that comes out of my mouth seems to be like a reductive expression of something that, I mean, I still haven't found a way of really understanding myself what happened in the last couple of years. I'm just amazed by the whole thing. And already it's beginning to take on that strangeness, which is not uncommon to me, where you feel really that somebody else did that. But I talked to Stephen a good bit before we started making the film, so it's not like he discovered me ready-made as Abraham Lincoln. But I think that whole thing, which tends to be spoken about on my behalf, because I try not to talk about it too much, but that whole thing takes on a mystique which is not really representative to me of the work itself, because it seems so clear to me that if I and most of my colleagues really do the same thing in different ways maybe, but we go to these great lengths to try and create a world for ourselves. And within that world, we try and create an understanding of the lives that we're expressing in that world. And for me, that's where the pleasure of the work is. So what would seem crazier to me is to jump in and out of that world, or in and out of the experience of that character, because that's really where I want to be. I guess finally there is some kind of mystery, because it either works or it doesn't work, and you've no idea what makes the difference, but it's just the joy of that work, really.
I ask you a question over here.
Yes.
This role, this person, Lincoln,
Yes.
everyone in this country knows, everyone throughout the world knows. Talk about, did you feel a bit of a responsibility? Was there a bit of a fright portraying a character that's so well known, so beloved around the world, not just in this country?
Well, yeah, I mean, to the extent that I really circled it for 7 years, I think it was, before I finally heard myself, to my own amazement, say, yes, let's try and do this. I think I was really pretty much convinced that I really wasn't the person that he needed to help him tell this story. I cherish my time working here. I've been blessed with wonderful experiences over the years. The last thing I wanted to do was to go down in flames, having desecrated the memory of the greatest president in the history of this country. Fear was something that I certainly was aware of, and I suppose the thing is that it's the work that takes over. Once that decision seems to make itself, which if you're lucky it does at some point, the curiosity in the work takes over. And luckily, not that it doesn't come back from time to time, but for the most part it just gets pushed aside. And then afterwards you think, oh, what was I thinking of? Why did I think I could do?
Chris or Jim in the Philippines, if you could go back in time and ask Abraham Lincoln
Yes.
one question, you're given the opportunity to ask him one question now that you've played him, what would that be?
Oh, when that is so unfair to ask me. I mean, I think I would be so paralyzed with all the questions jumping on each other that I would wish to ask him. I'd probably end up not saying a word. I'd just stand there and...
When you played him, he had a lot of different difficult decisions to make. Was there one that you would, want to ask? Maybe.
Well, I think probably the thing I'd have been most fascinated by, in a way, because so much is known about him and the world that he occupied during that extraordinary period of American history. I mean, there's thousands of books written. Also many contemporary accounts, his own writing, his own thoughts and memos and letters. And, we know an awful lot about him, it turns out, during that time. But what we don't know is what he would have done during the period after the war to bring about reconstruction. That's something I'd have been really fascinated to talk to him about. But I had a strange feeling towards the end of my time during the course of that work. I couldn't help wondering whether, even if he hadn't been assassinated, maybe he wouldn't have survived for very long. It felt to me as if he'd spent himself completely in the service of that country in that moment of time. So who knows whether he ever would have been able to oversee construction, but I think the history of the next 100 years would have been very substantially different had he been able to do that.